Welcome and good evening. My name's Jason, and this is Oil Painting Learning from the Masters, episode number 3. Tonight we're going to be talking about color, but we're going to do color through visual power. But before we get started, let's look at the crew, and we got somebody new to introduce you to. So, of course, I'm Jason. It's my wife Cindy, and then Satya Ma will be helping out when Cindy's not around. Because, sometimes she has things to do. So, there's the crew. Any questions and stuff, they'll be helping out in the chat. So, we can go ahead and ask that. If you have any questions during the show, you can type it. And then at the end of this show, we should have some time to answer some questions. So, just a quick review what we've done so far. We started by introducing and talking about visual power, and doing some exercises to kind of flex that muscle. We saw how if we get the focus on the inside rather than the outside of the form, it can make things give a lot of realism to it, form. And then last week, we looked at our setup, our crew, and some different crews, and talked about how when we're looking for color, we look for them as a group, not as a single color. Okay, so tonight we're going to continue and we're going to talk about color, and we'll do it through the lens of visual power. But first, we'll start with a little inspiration with the old masters. To be part of something, when that happens, we call it beauty. Beauty is achieved through harmony and visual power. Everything contributes to and is part of the harmonious visual power. It strikes a chord within us. It stuns us. We lose ourselves in the harmony. The masters understand that the real worth of any color is its ability to contribute to the harmony and visual power of the painting. Color is most useful when its purpose is serving the harmony and visual power of the painting. Are we getting the hang of that by now? Trying to look at things with those 4 lanes for visual power. And I'm sure all of you have seen that the master paintings we're looking at are a bit more complex than this. But I believe in starting with what we can do, and then let's build up to what they're doing. So although this is a simplified version of what they're up to, it allows us to clearly see what they're doing. So good to see so many of you guys here. So many students from the past. Great to see you guys, and there's been a lot of new people joining us too. So welcome, welcome. In the next segment in tonight's demo, what I do is I'll place the tube colors in the color wheel, in a yellow, red, blue color wheel, so you'll see them. And then with the colors on our palette, we'll do a little color wheel mix there. It's good to see that. And before we do, just one note, unless you're using exactly the same brand of paints as I am, your results will differ. Okay, so you'll need to be in charge and see what's happening with your paints. But again, this is supposed to be about you gaining the power. So tag along and follow along with me, but make sure you keep your eyes open and you see what's happening in front of you. Okay, so let's see a little demo on the color wheel. In today's demo, we're going to see where the colors on our palette belong on the color wheel. So more or less we have a yellow, red, blue setup. And so where would our white go in this setup? Well, our white actually acts as our blue. Yes, it's a neutral, but you'll see why it acts as our blue. Cad yellow is going to be our most intense yellow. And cadmium red is going to be our most intense red. Then yellow ochre is going to be more towards the center and just slightly over towards orange. Right, so it's still in the yellow piece of the pie, but it's not there on the edge. And for our burnt umber, again, it's going to be a little closer to the center, a little more neutral, and it's going to lean inside towards orange just a bit. Now, a word on paint here, on paint quality. Your tube paints may not be doing the same thing my tube paints are doing if you're getting something other than Old Holland paints. Okay, so you just have to be aware and see how these things act and mix. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix more or less without modifying any of the colors, a general color wheel that this creates. So you can see, and we have not been doing this with our exercise, but you can see as we mix the reds together, we get a whole family of reds. As we mix the yellows together, we get a whole family of yellows. And as we mix black and white together, again, black is going to land on blue, right? It's going to be our blue. So black and white, the gray, will also act as our blue. How do we make orange? Orange is yellow and red. So for the most intense orange, we'll mix our cadmium yellow and cadmium red. So in one sense, this is absolutely useless for a painting, other than knowing your way around your colors. Because as we've seen, for our painting, we want a small, very specific crew, right? Instead of picking out a yellow, an orange, and a red. We need different actors. But that being said, it's always a good idea to know what your paint will do. So how would we get a less intense orange then? Well, it will be yellow ochre and burnt umber. Right? And again, you have to pay attention to the quantities of each one and swing it around. And then as we mix that orange, the more neutral orange with more intense orange, you can see we get a whole family of oranges there. But once again, let me remind you, this isn't about getting the most intense color. Right? This is about, our paintings should be about a color harmony. Okay, then between the cad yellow and the cad red, look at all the different temperatures and hues we can run through. Yellow, a warmer yellow, orange, a warmer red, down to red. Cad red light isn't a, it's a pretty orange red. Let's just put it that way. And then in all of our exercises, we've been using yellows through reds, yellow, oranges, and reds for an advancing color, right, for our light and dark. And then for a receding color, for our middle, we've been using the cooler colors. Blue, green, purple. But by the colors we're using, our green, blue, and purple are what? Very weak. And what's a weak color going to do when compared to a strong color? Well, the weak color will seem to go away or recede, will disappear, right? Kind of get lost into the middle. Okay, so with our blue, our black and white, and our cad red, we can start mixing purples, right? And there'll be a whole range of the purples, and it'll be a little bit different if we mix it with the umbers than with the cads. And you may well be saying right now, that certainly doesn't look purple to me. Well, remember, it'll show up in the right relationship on the canvas. Okay, we're not going to search for a purple that's beautiful unto itself, because a painting isn't about a color being beautiful unto itself. A painting is about all the colors, about the painting being harmonious. And for a beautiful, harmonious painting, sometimes, at least to the novice, it seems like we're using some really nasty, gross, unbeautiful colors. But like the masters, we now know that color, its value is how it contributes to the harmony and beauty of the painting. Okay, as we get into a little bit of green, and then you can see how strong that red is. So that's another thing, right? That's leaning more towards orange than green, isn't it, up there? Right, so what's the answer? More blue. And really, for a true green, we'd probably keep all that orange out of there. Okay, so a little bit messy, but you get a sense of the color wheel with our palette colors. Okay, I'd love to hear if you guys found that useful. I debated whether to show you guys that or not, but I think there's probably a good number of you who maybe that showed a little bit differently than you'd seen or thought about color before. Again, there'll be a few minutes for questions towards the end. If you got a question on any of that, go ahead and get that typed in, and Cindy and Satyama will relay that to me. But until then, we're going to keep marching forward. So this week with the student work, what I did is I gathered a lot of examples of the exercise that you guys have sent in. And so I thought we'd do a little bit of a tour, kind of, if you're in a class, you get to walk around and see everybody's work. So we're going to start with a short tour of everybody's work, and then I'll make some brief comments about it. See you on the other side, and then the big meat and potatoes for this one will be the exercise for next week. Okay, but first let's look at some student work and see what everybody's been up to these last couple of weeks. This makes me so happy. Everything's in order. We have our highlight, our light, our middle, our dark. It has the appropriate visual power, and there's plenty of paint. And then what a beautiful harmony they created with good visual power. Another beautiful example, right? You can clearly see light, middle, highlight, light, middle, dark, and it looks good. Now, I've included this one because I'm sure more than one of you've had this mistake, but what happened here is they tried to combine week 1 and 2 instead of letting it dry. So wet into wet sometimes can get us into trouble. Here, again, beautiful. Look how that comes off the page. Now the background is almost equal to the shadow, and what that does is it makes the light really pop, doesn't it? But look at the beautiful brushwork that they're experimenting with. So very good. It makes me so happy to see all you guys working and sending these in. Thank you so much. And then this is nice too, very systematic here. This is how I like to work when I'm learning something, is let's just play it all out, let me run through it, and then let me get a feel for it. But what a beautiful harmony and power, and look how that background just seems alive. It's not as powerful, but it still seems as alive. And then once you kind of feel that, you're inspired to do it more and more and more. So they tried several different backgrounds here. Just beautiful. Great to see this, guys. Great job. Okay, did you guys like that? Seeing everybody's work? Of course, I can't include everybody, but I try to include things that were, as I see, common areas and common questions and common problems. On the one, what happened is she did week 1, and then why week 1 was still wet, she went ahead and tried to do week 2, which was the layering and things like that. What I've found is I work on a painting once a week, and then I'll let it dry for a week, and then I'll work on it again. Excuse me. By working in layers like this, you can really be in control. And by keeping everything so simple, you've got the setup, your 4 setup, put that on a little gray palette, tape it to the back of the painting. Next week when you're ready to go, you take that color scheme off, you put it down, and you go at it. Okay? So keep sending me everything you've got. I love to see it. It helps me steer the course. We'll be running this course through the end of May. Okay, so the main exercise tonight is we're going to mix some color. But we want to do this through the lens of visual power. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix a light and a dark for yellow, yellow light, yellow dark, red light, red dark, and then orange light and orange dark, so that we can start working on our colors. I didn't want to introduce it too soon, but we do want our light and our shadow to feel like the same color object. It's this color in light and this color in shadow. Okay, and by just doing this, even though these sound simple, you're going to get a real intimacy with the colors and the paint. And as you're painting, you'll be able to really clear your mind of all the color questions and rubble-rabble out there and just get straight to visual power. Okay? So let's look at this exercise. If you have questions on anything, something that you sent in, or something of the exercise or the color mixing, get that typed in and we'll get it answered at the end of the program. Otherwise, we'll just keep everything rolling and send you guys off to work. So let's look at this week's exercise and we'll meet back up on the other side. For your exercises this week, I wanted to get a little bit more specific about color with this palette and how we use it. Right? So what we're going to do right now is we're going to mix from our crew of the highlight, light, and the middle. We're going to mix our light, and we want to have a yellow in light, a red in light, and from those two we'll make an orange in light. Okay? We will also then mix our yellow and dark, our red and dark, and our orange and dark. So our light, we're going to use our earth tones with white. So then it's really just yellow, ochre, and white. And then how much of each depends on the value that we're going to put the light at. Okay? So yellow is pretty simple. Again, yellow, ochre, and white. Red's not much different. Our reds in light will be burnt umber with white. Again, these quantities, it seems like it'd be super simple, but it can be a little trickier than you think. So spend some time and try to get it right. So one of the reasons we're using these for our light is it befuddles most novices to learn that the more lit up something is, actually the less color it has. Right? Light's gonna actually blanch out or gray off the color. And then our shadows can hold what will feel like some more of the color. So how do we get orange? Again, we're not going to have some imaginary orange in our head that we have to match to get to. Orange in our case is simply yellow plus red. So we mix that up, and as you can see, it's more orange than the yellow and more orange than the red. Again, the exact quantity can be tricky. If you have student grade paints or not good quality paints, it gets harder and harder to control the color. What happens is the pigment goes to just nothingness. It loses its color identity very quickly because there's so much filler. If you can get 100% pigment with just linseed oil, that's where you'll get your richest colors from. Okay, so there we have it. Yellow in light, orange in light, and red in light. Now the red seemed a little bit darker than the other two, and I want them more or less on the same value. So for that reason, I wanted to see the red just a tiny bit lighter so that it's more in line with the value of the yellow and the orange. Okay, and those are quite different than the most intense yellow and the most intense red and orange that we mixed up in the demo, wasn't it? Okay, so now if we take our blue, which is our black and white, then what you want to do is you want to get the blue or the modifying color to a similar or hopefully the same value as your light. So right here I can see, you know, it's a little bit darker. So how do we lighten it up? Simply with our white. This is feeling a bit closer to me. Now if we work that blue just a little bit at a time, we can start modifying or making a red and a less red, an orange and a weaker orange. See how we can weaken that orange with that gray? That's acting that's acting as our middle right now. Right? And the color does bend our blue or our gray just a little bit, and then our gray weakens the color or neutralizes it. So as long as we can have a strongest and then weaker, we're in good shape. We're in control. Okay, again, we're looking at color through the lens of visual power. Visual power. Okay, so we'll clean up the grays that we mixed here so that we can mix up some dark values of yellow, of orange, and red. And why do we need to do that? Well, we want the object in light to appear to be the same color as that same object in shadow. So the light and the shadow needs to appear as the same color unless there's outside influences acting on it. And that would be for a later day, but like reflected light or reflected color from other objects in the scene. So for our dark yellow, we can't just use cadmiums, but we can use yellow ochre with cadmium and then leave the white out. But again, that's going to make our value pretty light, and this is supposed to be our dark. So if we use some burnt umber, that's going to take our yellow a little bit orange. And if we use our black, that'll take our yellow a little bit green, so that umber and black can balance each other out and darken our yellow. Okay, so this was our base, was yellow ochre. We had cadmium yellow to get the warmth. Then I added some burnt umber and black, ivory black, right, to bring the value down. If I just used black, it would go green. If I just used umber to darken it off, it would go orange. So now, for the orange, it would be yellow ochre and burnt umber. Right, so our earth tone will be our base. And we're not going to use any white, but we are going to put some cadmium. And what cadmium should we put in there? Well, we should put in cadmium orange. And cadmium orange from our palette is our cad yellow and cad red light mixed together. It's cad yellow light, cad red light. And that cadmium can be strong, so it doesn't take very much of it. And then that'll liven that shadow up just a little bit, or more than a little bit. Now, if you look at your dark yellow and the dark orange, can you see the difference there? Again, don't get a dark orange as a particular color. It's a direction, right? It's a relationship. So for our red, our base will be burnt umber, and then we'll add a little cadmium red. And I didn't want it that dark, that's why I moved that pile over, trying to control the value a little bit. Okay, and you guys remember that there's two parts to mixing, two stages to mixing, right? We mix our setup first, and here we're just mixing light and dark. We're not mixing middle or highlight. So the first stage is the setup, mix them up. Then what's the second step? What's the second step? Well, the second step is harmonizing. So a little light of the yellow go in the dark of the yellow, a little dark of the yellow will go in the light. Now again, quantity matters, and depending on what paint brands you're using, the strength of the pigment will change. But watch how this really livens up the light and shadow of each hue. Look how much more red that became. Okay, so much of painting is being patient and waiting for the right time and not expecting things at the wrong time. When you bake a cake, you don't expect to have the frosting with the pictures and the happy birthday printed on there before it goes in the oven, do you? No. You realize that it's a process. Oil painting's no different. Okay, so as we harmonize or do the second stage, the second step in our mixing, right, the colors start to come alive a little more, don't they? Right, and one of the reasons they're becoming alive is because they're shifting into relationship, into a richer relationship. Okay, so we have our light yellow, our dark yellow, our light orange, our dark orange, our light red, and the dark red. Okay, so this week I'd like you to give this a try. Yellow, orange, and red. Your lights and your darks. And don't forget to harmonize. Okay, what do you guys think? Some lights and darks this week? Are you up for it? Last week we talked about the magic middle and how the middle can really change the color, oftentimes more than the color can change the color. Okay, so this week we're doing light and dark of our yellow, red, and orange. And then if you combine that with last week's lessons of changing the background and seeing what you get, man, you're going to have some tools. You're going to have some tools. Okay, well, that about wraps it up for tonight's show. If you found this content helpful, we really appreciate a thumbs up. A subscribe is good too. And if it was good enough to deserve an attaboy, Cindy's put up a link for any tips or donations. Please keep sending any work. Like I said, even if you don't get a direct response, I do look at it all to judge the direction of the course that we're taking. All right. Oh my goodness. All right, everybody. Well, we'll say goodbye to the crew, and then hopefully we'll see photos of what you guys been up to and catch you again live next week. So from all of us here, we'll see you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.